the university should choose to remember and honor the life of the late Katikkiro Martin Luther Nsibirwa, a man who served his nation with distinction and who laid down his life in the pursuit of public service and the advancement of the people of Buganda, the people of Uganda, and of East Africa at large. Let me start by acknowledging the remarks of Mama Rhoda Nsibirwa, which she's just made a few minutes back. We thank God that He has given her life to witness this historic moment. I also want to acknowledge the remarks of the chairperson and, of course, of the Vice-Chancellor, who has generously introduced me. When I received the invitation, I did not hesitate to reschedule all my other commitments to make time and be here today. Madam Chairperson, as many people know, Makerere University is my alma mater, and my studies and experiences on this hallowed campus contributed greatly to making me who and what I am today. I was therefore pleased to be given the opportunity to give back by contributing to the pursuit of knowledge, as well as to connect with the young people who are studying here today. And I thank them for coming in such large numbers. As I will elaborate later, there are a few points that I would like to invite scholars with greater qualification than myself to ponder, research into, and act upon. However, I would also like to start by stating that I stand before you as a graduate of this great establishment, and I think I'm a living proof of what Makerere University can produce. So if there is a young man or woman in the audience today who has come to listen to this lecture with some uncertainty or self-doubt, I hope seeing me standing here will inspire them to set ambitious goals, as well as to have the dedication and tenacity to see them through. It's important in life to start things, but it's more important to be tenacious, to be resilient, to walk the entire journey. So probably this will inspire you to do that. In 1883, this was during the reign of Kabaka'S I, and I'm told that Nsibirwa's father, Chiwana, was in service of Kabaka'S I, making canoes for Buganda's naval fleet. Buganda had a navy on Lake Victoria. Actually, the Kingdom of Buganda was in charge of the entire Lake Victoria, stretching to Tanzania today and Kenya. For those who are students of history, these were rapidly changing times in this part of the world. Buganda was a native kingdom in expansion mode at this time. Buganda had acquired guns from the Zanzibari Arabs who had come to the court of Mutesa's father, Ssekabaka Suna II, who is lying in Wamala, not far from here, in the 1940s and in the 1840s and 1850s. Expansion was occurring at the expense of native neighbors, most especially the Kingdom of Bunyoro. But even as Buganda was expanding, it was also at the center of competing Western European imperialist interests. John Huntington Speke, I think you know him. We've had places named after him. We may have to ask ourselves the particular reason why, but you know many of them. John Huntington Speke had opined that Narubari, Lake Narubari, which he named Lake Victoria, for reasons I'm not very clear about, was the source of the Nile in 1858. This aroused British interest in controlling Buganda so as to secure its imperial interests in Egypt. It's also worth noting that the Berlin Conference, in which the great European powers, as they call themselves, agreed to carve up Africa into different spheres of influence. That took place in 1884, just 1 year after Nsibirwa was born. Nsibirwa's life spanned the reign of 4 Kabaka'S of Buganda: Mutesa I, Mwanga II, Chwa II, and Mutesa II. If you look at the situation in Buganda and Africa as a whole at the time Nsibirwa was born, and compare it to the situation that pertained at the time of his death in 1945, you can appreciate that he lived in times of drastic and very dramatic change. The young men emerged from this bisakate, plural for ichisakate, ready for deployment as administrators and military leaders. Nsibirwa was no exception to this general trend. And after being mentored in Kagwa's Chisakate and distinguishing himself by diligent learning and service, he was deployed formally as a Gombola chief in Ichagwe in 1920. You know, he was born in 1883. At the age of 37, he was a Gombola chief. He must have done well because 2 years later, that is 1922, when Makerere was starting, he was promoted to the office of Makerere, Saza chief of Makerere County. You know, for the young people here, that is Kayunga district today, I think. When Makerere was starting, Martin Luther Nsibirwa was a county chief. And county chiefs at that time were no joking subject. Again, he made a good account of himself. And between 1924 and 1925, he was acting in Mukwenda, the Saza chief of Singo, which was a much larger and more politically as well as economically important county. He was to return to Bugere in 1925, only to be appointed the substantive Mukwenda, that is the county chief of Singo, in 1927. Honorable Bagala comes from Mitiana, which is within Singo County. When I said Mukwenda, she added of Singo. She's waiting for the verdict of the Court of Appeal. I don't know why she didn't hire me as her lawyer. 1 year later, in 1928, he was appointed Omwanika, the very position being held by his grandson, Ochitiva Robert Wagwan Nsibirwa. And don't you think he resembles him? Look at that picture here and look at him. And you know, under the 1900 agreement, Buganda had 3 ministers. The Buganda government had 3 ministers. The Katikkiro is a ministerial post. You're just prime, but you're a minister. The Katikkiro, the Mwanika, and the Mulamuzi. And he was occupying one of those 3 coveted offices. And he held that office for only 1 year before becoming Katikkiro in 1929. Incidentally, he is the first Katikkiro to reside in the Butikkiro. Butikkiro is the official residence of the Katikkiro, where I reside. In 1929, its construction started in 1926, completed when it was Katikkiro, and it was the first Katikkiro to reside and work within it. Iconic building. Professor Nawango is an architect. He appreciates these things. He was to serve as Katikkiro until 1941, when he was forced to resign because of his perceived less than enthusiastic handling of the Namasole affair. You know, in Buganda, in Namasole, the mother of the Kabaka does not remarry. Now, Upon the demise of Kabaka Daudichwa, 1939, his wife became the Namasole because she was the mother of Kabaka Edward Mutesa. But then she remarried to a gentleman called Peter Chigozi. Taboo. And the Katikkiro was forced to resign. Nsibirwa was replaced as Katikkiro by OHT was Samuel Wamala, a member of the Buganda Luchiko, who was well known for his radical anti-colonial sentiments. Wamala's tenure was short and somewhat restless, owing largely to his difficult relationship with the British colonial government. Wamala was forced to resign in 1945 and was actually exiled by the British, I think in Karamoja. You know, you've witnessed people being driven from Kampala to Nakasongola, from Kampala, I think even to Karamoja, recently, in recent times, contemporary history. It started way back with the British. And this was not an ordinary political actor. This was the Katikkiro of Buganda. Wasn't that, you know, impetuous? But they did it. In July 1945, Nsibirwa was reappointed Katikkiro of Buganda. He was considered a safe pair of hands both by the British and the young Ssekabaka Mutesa II, who ascended the throne in 1939. When it was clear in the mind of Kabaka Daudichwa that he might die, he called the Katikkiro, Martin Luther Nsibirwa, and told him, "Should I die, please help my son." And those who witnessed that moment recounted it to Ssekabaka Edward Mutesa. So when they went to Chabwe in Namakomo to bring back Nsibirwa as Katikkiro, he declined. He was, I think, even angry because he was forced to resign. You remember the Namasola affair? His colleagues in cabinet, members of the Luchiko, the Bataka, were very unkind to him. You know, Professor and Madam Chairperson, you see these Batakas here? When they think I've erred, they can be very unkind to me. You see them seated here nicely listening. And these colleagues of mine, they can be very unkind to the Katikkiro. You know, the Katikkiro is like in a position of a football team made available to all members of society on what economists call non-excludable and non-rivalrous basis. Economists like Professor Gobi, I think. A good is non-excludable if it is free. That is available to everyone without a charge being made for it. A good is said to be non-rivalrous if it can be enjoyed by many consumers at once without anyone's consumer's enjoyment of it affecting the enjoyment of another. Roads are a good example of public goods. Once constructed, everyone and anyone can use it, the road, free of charge. I know there are tolls around Busega there. And my proper use of that road should not derogate from the enjoyment of the same road by another person. National defense or law enforcement are also frequently given as examples of public goods. So it is highly debatable whether higher education, such as is offered here at Makerere, is a public good. It's highly debatable. It is largely no longer free of charge. It is also not non-rivalrous in the sense that even though the university has been expanding, there is a limit to the number of students that can be admitted before standards begin to drop perilously. There is a limit. So if we are going to talk about education, then perhaps we should focus on what the economists call the positive externalities of the consumption of education by a few. A positive externality is said to exist if the consumption of a good or service by one person benefits a third party who has not consumed the good or service himself or herself. Education of a few individuals can have an incalculably beneficial effect on society as a whole and can even come to be appreciated as a public good. I mean, a doctor is going to treat the public. One doctor who qualifies, like the late Rose Nsibirwa Chigonya was a doctor. She handled medical issues of so many people. And I think the impact of that one person is incalculable. The leaders of our native institutions, of whom Nsibirwa was an outstanding example, implicitly understood the value and positive externality of education. This trend started right from Kabaka'S II, who was the first Kabaka of Buganda to come into contact with distant and more technological advanced foreigners. But I think that was perhaps best personified by Kabaka Mutesa I. In his famed letter to Queen Victoria, Mutesa I, written in 1875, about a decade before Nsibirwa was born, Mutesa's primary request was for Queen Victoria to send experts, abakugu mu by'amagezi, that's how he coined it, who could teach him and the people of Buganda so that Buganda could achieve the same level of technological advancement as Britain. The primary thing that Mutesa wanted to obtain was education, which could enable the people of Buganda to savor in the amenities of technological advancement. Christian missionaries took advantage of Mutesa's letter and came to Buganda. History, my dear friends, they took advantage. And I think you are happy for it. You're always in churches, aren't you? And relying on miracles to survive. Read your books. There are no miracles in any church or any mosque. God helps only those who help themselves. We have also engaged in driving vaccination programs for infectious diseases such as COVID-19, polio, and many others. On the education front, more than 25,000 students have benefited from the Kabaka Education Fund in the past 20 years or so. In all, the Kingdom of Buganda remains focused on improving the lives of the people of Buganda and engendering public goods for the people of Buganda, for all Ugandans, and for people of East Africa. Next Thursday on the 12th of May, it will be 9 years since I was announced Katikkiro of Buganda. And if anyone thinks that I've contributed anything to the public good in Buganda and in Uganda during my tenure as Katikkiro, in those 9 years, it's because I am privileged to stand on the shoulders of heroes like Martin Luther and Nsibirwa, who clearly understood the meaning of serving the community. Before I wind up, I would like to commend the university administration headed by the Vice Chancellor for turning Kabaka Mutesa's residence into the Mutesa II Museum. Any community that is going to make advancement or progress must have a sense of history. We are not products of industrial lines, of factories. Kabaka Mutesa studied here before he went to Cambridge. He's an alumnus of this university, therefore. And the house where he slept has been restored and turned into a museum in commemoration of his own contribution to education in Uganda. That is commendable, Professor. And it is gratifying to hear that the ivory tower is being restored. It's gratifying to hear that the ivory tower is being restored. I told Professor Nawang, fortunately he's an architect, we want to see it as it was. You know, yes, as it was. Well, I don't think we should have these modern twists and designs and strange things that people are interested in these days. Actually, originally, it didn't even have that blue color on the windowsill. Originally, it didn't even have the blue color on the windowsill. It was white and off-white and gray. Because restoration is about recreating what existed for posterity. I'm sure you all know as scholars that been different universities, they could have built iconic towers. But when you visit all of them, they maintain especially the symbols of those institutions as they were. That's why I was very pleased when they restored the house of Kabaka'S as it was when he slept in it. When we regained Katikkiro, we restored it as it was by the time Katikkiro Mayanja and Kanji left on the 24th of May, 1966. And we're now restoring Kasubi tombs. We're about to end the restoration. And you know, with the tombs, we've gone back to the original structures it was by Kabaka Mutesa the first, because Kabaka Daudicho had made a few changes. We've gone back, we went to the Royal Geographical Society in London, and we got the actual photographs of Mutesa's house, Muzibazala Mpanga. So, the Ivory Tower, we look forward to enjoying Makerere with the Ivory Tower back in place, and we thank you so very much.